We will not be lectured on food security by a country that can't keep its own grocery shelves affordable. Canada grows the potatoes. Canada sets the terms. And if Washington doesn't like that, American consumers will feel it every single time they open a menu. That was Mark Carney speaking to reporters in Ottawa on February 19, 2026, standing at a podium flanked by a delegation of Prince Edward Island potato growers, hours after Donald Trump attempted to use emergency trade powers to pressure Canada into slashing potato export prices by 30%, threatening retaliatory tariffs on Canadian agricultural goods if Ottawa refused to comply. Trump's demand collapsed within 48 hours. And the blowback didn't just embarrass Washington. It sent U.S. potato prices into a freefall spiral that cost American retailers an estimated $2.3 billion in forward contract losses almost overnight. For decades, the U.S.-Canada agricultural relationship operated on a quiet, almost invisible logic. Canada supplies roughly 34% of all processed potato products consumed in the United States: frozen fries, hash browns, dehydrated flakes, the unglamorous backbone of every fast food chain, school cafeteria, and diner from Maine to California. The border between the two countries was, for this industry, essentially invisible. Then Trump decided it was a leverage point. Trump invoked Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, the same blunt instrument he used on steel and aluminum, to classify Canadian potato imports as a threat to American agricultural security. On February 14, 2026, his administration announced a 22% tariff on all Canadian fresh and processed potato exports, effective March 1st, with a stated goal of forcing Canadian producers to renegotiate long-term supply contracts at prices favorable to U.S. fast food conglomerates. The logic, if you can call it that, squeeze Canadian farmers, lower their margins, and make them dependent on U.S. pricing terms. What Trump didn't calculate, or didn't care to, was that Canada had options. Within 72 hours, Carney's trade office had opened emergency consultations with the European Union, Japan, and South Korea. Canada already exports $410 million in potato products annually to non-U.S. markets. By February 20th, a preliminary framework was on the table to redirect up to 60% of U.S.-bound processed potato volume toward EU buyers, who had been quietly lobbying Ottawa for exactly this kind of expanded supply agreement for months. The message from Carney's office was surgical and blunt. Canadian producers don't need one customer. They need fair customers. Now let's talk about what this means if you're an average American. The retail price of a 5-pound bag of russet potatoes in U.S. grocery stores climbed from $4.89 to $6.43 within 3 weeks of the tariff announcement, a 31% spike that hit before a single container had even been rerouted. That's the futures market pricing in scarcity before it arrives. For fast food operators, the math is staggering. McDonald's, which sources approximately $1.2 billion in frozen potato products from Canadian processors annually, announced in an internal memo leaked to the Wall Street Journal that each tariff point above 15% adds roughly $54 million in annual input costs. At 22%, that's close to $380 million in unexpected overhead, costs that will land on the menu price of every large fry ordered in America. Analysts at TD Cowen estimated that U.S. consumers will absorb $900 million in additional food costs by Q3 2026 if the tariff holds. That's not a corporate problem. That's a dinner table problem. Meanwhile, Canada didn't just absorb the blow, it rewired. On February 22nd, the Canadian Potato Council signed a €280 million 3-year supply agreement with a consortium of German and Dutch food processors, the largest single agricultural export deal in Canadian history. Within the same week, Japan's Ministry of Agriculture fast-tracked a phytosanitary certification review that had been sitting in bureaucratic limbo for 2 years, clearing the way for Canadian potato imports to enter the Japanese market at scale. This is what strategic patience looks like when it's weaponized. Canada had been building these relationships quietly for years. Trump's tariff didn't catch Ottawa off guard. It gave Ottawa the political permission slip to execute a pivot it had already designed. The EU deal alone is projected to absorb 2.4 million metric tons of Canadian potato product over the contract period. That's volume that was previously moving south. Now it's moving east. And once those supply chains are built, once those processing contracts are signed, once German food manufacturers retool their logistics around Canadian supply, that volume does not come back to the U.S. market on American terms. It comes back, if at all, on Canadian terms. The industrial fallout across the U.S. doesn't stop at the grocery store. Agricultural equipment manufacturers in Idaho and Wisconsin are already flagging order cancellations, with Canadian growers redirecting product away from U.S.-adjacent processing facilities. 3 major potato processing plants in the Pacific Northwest announced temporary production slowdowns affecting approximately 4,200 workers. The Idaho Potato Commission, not exactly a hotbed of anti-Trump sentiment, released a statement on February 21st calling the tariff a direct threat to domestic processing capacity. U.S. cold storage and logistics firms that built their entire operational model around cross-border potato volume are staring at a $340 million revenue gap for fiscal year 2026. That gap doesn't fill itself. And here's the layer that rarely gets covered. This isn't just about potatoes. Every agricultural trading partner watching this episode, from Mexican avocado growers to Chilean blueberry exporters, is updating their contingency plans for U.S. market exit. Trump hasn't just hit Canada, he's sent a signal to every food exporter on Earth that the American market is an unreliable anchor. The diversification cascade this triggers will cost U.S. agricultural buyers far more than any tariff revenue collected. So where does this leave us? Donald Trump picked a fight over potatoes, one of the most foundational, unglamorous, democratically consumed foods on the planet, and handed Canada a geopolitical gift. Carney's government looks decisive. Canadian farmers look resilient, European and Asian buyers look smart for seizing the moment, and the American consumer is staring at a $6.43 bag of russets wondering why their French fries cost more than they did 6 months ago. The tariff was supposed to be a pressure tool. Instead, it became a crowbar that pried open new markets for Canada that American exporters will spend years trying to claw back. Trump has now deployed Section 232 against steel, aluminum, automobiles, and agricultural goods from one of the most deeply integrated trading partners in human history. Each time, the stated goal is leverage. The actual result is accelerated decoupling, with Canada landing on its feet and American industries absorbing the shrapnel. The question isn't whether Canada can survive Trump's economic pressure campaign. The question is whether the United States can afford to keep running it. What do you think? Write us your thoughts in the comments below. And guys, I would really appreciate it if you like and subscribe to the channel because these videos takes me a lot of time to research and write, and your support is the only thing that keeps me motivated, and it really means a lot to me. So thanks.